to the webinar Homeflow, the Scholarship of Extension. My name is Michael Goldschmidt. I'm the National Director of the Healthy Homes Partnership. Dr. Randall Cantrell, the presenter today, is part of our Healthy Homes Partnership, and this project that he's going to be presenting on is part of a project that we have funded for him. Very exciting webinar about Homeflow. I appreciate everybody being here for the webinar. We are recording this webinar and it will be available for later viewing and for sharing with anybody that could not make it to the webinar. Everybody right now is muted. When we get to the end of Randy's talk, I will unmute people so you can ask questions. If you have questions before then, you are welcome to use the questions or chat window, and I will make sure that we read them to Randy as he was presenting. Dr. Randall Cantrell is a researcher and state specialist of housing and community development as a faculty member in the Department of Family, Youth, and Community Services at the University of Florida Institute of Food and Agriculture. He got much of his practical training while working at the National Association of Home Builders Research Center, now the Home Innovation Research Labs, after he received his PhD. While there, he learned just how far engineering solutions can go in determining why the flow of a home varies. Now he seeks to hone in on the remainder of the reasons of why homes vary in the degree to which they flow using social science methods. He sums up the motivation for his work by saying it cannot all be about the gadgetry and technology. Eventually, the variation in the actions of the occupants must be accounted for. So it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Randall Cantrell.
All right, Michael, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to explain where I've been taking this Homeflow notion. Last year, I introduced Homeflow, so that will not be the topic of today. It will be where I've taken Homeflow and how I'm circling it back into the scholarship of Homeflow and the scholarship of extension and what that means. So I always have to give attribution to my colleagues who helped develop the Homeflow extension program. So Dr. Harris and Sarah Ellis, who are not going to be presenting with me, are my co-developers of the extension program, Homeflow. If you want to go back and see what I presented last year, it is certainly on the Healthy Homes Partnership website that Michael mentioned, where this will be and where some of the Homeflow videos are housed. However, today I'm just going to give you a little background and then we'll go right into what the Scholarship of Extension means to me and hopefully to all of us. But as Michael was saying, I was in industry working, trying to figure out with these engineers, how do we make everything sort of human proof, where we just sort of make the house work and it's as efficient as can be. And I got to a point where I realized we've gotten it there. They called it toward net zero. It was as close as it was going to get in the engineering crew, and as much of my engineering background as I could tolerate, they weren't bringing in the human being enough. So I came back to UF, where I had been as an undergrad a long time ago, and I published Homeflow in Housing and Society, the analysis of the home living situation. And there I established a theoretical framework, and that was for the academic research part of my appointment, and then started working on the extension part of my appointment, which much of it was through the grant-funded database Homeflow extension curriculum we're talking about. And that allowed me to start gathering data points so that I could empirically test the theoretical framework that I had posited in the journal. And we want to see, to what degree is something in theory aligned with something in practice, and how much are they misaligned. And it would be infeasible for me to try and test that entire theoretical framework. So Homeflow is only going to be testing elements of it from what I'm able to do. My data set's not perfect, but hopefully other people will be able to help me test other parts of the framework. And then afterwards, from here on out, we'll have a theoretical and an applied framework of Homeflow. And of course, I have to give attribution where is necessary. The Healthy Homes Partnership, now in its second round of funding, has made all the world difference for me, and able to keep Homeflow up and running and being able to pull the data points in to continue testing it. And here at the University of Florida, the IFAS Program and Development Evaluation Center, everybody has an acronym, PDEC, they made Homeflow a pilot evaluation, so everything is automated and Qualtrics, and it makes it very efficient for me to gather these data points. What I'm hoping not for today is anybody to sit back and say, have you thought too deeply about this approach and that approach? This is simply my notes scratched out on the back of an envelope for where I am going to go with the Scholarship of Extension when I publish it. I haven't even begun. I just said, okay, I'm going to scratch some notes out and I'm going to share it with my colleagues, and then I'll start. So I'm sort of doing it backwards. You're really supposed to publish it, and then you're supposed to say, okay, here's what I published. I understand my horse is probably before my cart, but that's, you know, my impetuosity. And then some probably didn't even want to get on today because they're sitting here thinking, oh boy, what's he into? So I won't go over your head. I'm going to gloss right over some of the mathematics, because that's not what we're into today. I just want to sort of give you the overview of where I'm going, and you can read about it if you want to read about it when it comes out. But I want you to sort of sit back and get the big picture. If you have, you know, everything has to be evidence-based, so if you have the research that's fueling your extension, you have to eventually tie that extension back around and publish it and put it out there for the world to see, and that is closing the loop on the Scholarship of Extension. So that's where we're going today. So for me to even begin to fathom that flow has anything to do with me would be a wild hallucination. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, I'll do the best I can there, came up with flow, Eastern European psychologist in the 70s, and I stumbled upon it and just fell in love with it. And basically, he's aligning on the two axes, maximum challenges for you and maximum skill sets for you being aligned, where you have high arousal, you're highly interested, and you have high control. You're able to control your interest, and you're highly, I think in one instance he uses, for those who have any background in downhill skiing, you don't have time to sit around and think about things except how to get down that slope and how to embrace the pure enjoyment. Anything else that comes into the skill set required and the challenges required and the enjoyment required to get down that ski slope will cause you problems getting down that ski slope. That is when you're in a state of flow. A mother nursing her third child, you know how to do it very well. You're not concerned you're doing it wrong, but you really don't have time. I mean, some of them can smoke a cigarette and talk on the telephone and this and that, but you really don't have time to do a whole lot except nurse that child. You're in a state of flow. So I simply took his wonderful theory and I said, what about the home? Why is the home falling apart in disarray physically, emotionally, in every which way? And we have all these divorce rates and all this and all that. Why can't the home be in a state of flow? And that's where I started being wondering about these connections between the health of the home and those who reside in it. And I don't care if you call a home a bridge with a grocery basket underneath. You can call your residence or your shelter, whatever you want to call it. The energy, both personal inward energy and the actual energy that heats or cools the home, and the functional efficiency of how that home is run, how the home is maintained, or how upgrades are done to it, the way the family operates that residence, the communications that take place between those who reside within, and the safety routines and the practices done within. That's what I'm referring to when I talk about Homeflow. And then you can see the publication that I referred to that came out in Housing and Society. Earlier on, we were mainly a print journal, and then we went online. So that's why you see the two different dates there. I'll blow this up in a bigger version so that you can actually see the summary with the theoretical model, but that's where it all began. So essentially the theoretical model is saying that when the US household owners were sampled, where you have variation between how the homes were built and how the behavior of those residing in the homes varied. And they said that they believed that improvements within those three constructs in the middle, minor home conservation, basic energy upgrades, whether they be practice or products, family operations, how the family conducts its affairs within that residence, and maintenance, how the home is maintained, should result in stronger families and communities and financial times and financial savings and time savings. That was what came out of the academic study. So that's the theoretical model, and that's where I began for a 2-year extension. Anybody that's been around the block understands you just can't jump into extension. It's a whole nother ball of wax trying to make extension work for the folks out in the field. So it took a while to take this academic program, and it took those colleagues of mine to turn it into what you're about to see now, which was a full-blown turnkey curriculum for extension, where we had all the materials professionally done. We had all of the pocket fold-outs, checklists people could carry with them. We're working essentially for a client. Habitat for Humanity was our initial client, driving all of our direction on this. We had the trifolds so that everybody could sort of pass it out and let everyone see. If you wanted to put your own name and place right in the middle here, that was a possibility as well. And then it eventually ended up where all good things end up, in our bookstore. So you could get your startup kit, you get your 10 workbooks so that your participants in the class can go along as you're giving the presentation. They can do their interactive exercises. You have your 25 fold-out pocket pamphlets so the participants can track their progress, and then you have the flash drive so that you can have all the presentations right there for either you to do the presentation or for you to allow us to do the presentation. It's as interactive as you choose or need it to be. And I think they have a one-time $99.99 charge, or however they want to set it up. But essentially, you have a video production here of 2.5 hours, and you can see how it's laid out. It comes out with something to do with my background, which is housing and community development, then my colleagues, which is marriage and relationships. So we keep bouncing back and forth. Communication, then we come back to the home, then we go back to communication, and these are all video segments. Then we go back to the home, then we go back to how do you take care of those in the home, then we come back to another module of taking care of the home, then a third colleague of mine, she talks about, she's more into finances, then we go back to an example of how to make an upgrade to the home, and then we have built-in evaluations. And then this is my note where I have to make sure and let you get a feel for how those videos work, because if you don't feel comfortable teaching housing, then I'll teach it.
Home is physically healthy, switching gears from emotionally healthy because it breathes. I know that sounds a little different, but let's talk about how a home breathes. Here's the graphic, if I can slip out of your way. Here's all these design features the engineers and architects build in, You know, if you have a fireplace, maybe in Florida, you may.
And we go on and we teach it. I know that might have been a little tricky. I'm not sure if my volume was adjusted correctly. If you're not familiar with marriage and relationships or with communication, then toggle over to the video. I'm sorry, that video went one, two, many. You can toggle over to the video and let my colleague.
So let's talk about healthy family functioning, specifically with regard to communicating effectively. You can see that from some of the things that Dr. Cantrell talked about, that there could definitely be a lot of communication issues around physical maintenance of the household. We want to talk about communication in general, so that regardless.
And then he'll go on. So there's some people who are more versed in one area than another, so you can toggle in and out, back and forth, however you want to do it, and eventually you can teach yourself to do this entire program yourself. But meanwhile, if you don't know finances, Sarah?
So you just heard Dr. Cantrell, and he has some really good points there. Sounds really great, but our budget is a little tight, or my budget is tight. So how can we do these upgrades? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about healthy family functioning and family finances.
She's a specialist in finances. So the point being is you don't have to know anything. You can be fully a facilitator, or you can toggle back and forth in between any of these topics in order to teach that. But that's not really the point of today. Homeflow is a separate issue. So you have your built-in evaluations, and that comes with the program. But we don't just want the knowledge gain. We want to know some baseline behavior changes. So this is all built into the Qualtrics. So we want to know health-wise, how does the family function in terms of before they ever get started. And this is what will go back out to them on routine intervals of 6 months. How are you improving along these baseline functions? And then when we got the Healthy Homes grant, we had to get very targeted measures to add to it to see how specific type of health functions were being addressed in the home. So we added those to the measures that were being, and you can see that just by our N, you can tell where they started to change. So the 50s are the newer ones that have been added versus the older ones that have been going on, but we're all in the right type of range mean-wise. I mean, there's room certainly for improvement, but it's not like they're missing on the 1 through 5 scale by a mile. I mean, even on the reverse code, open windows when it's humid outside, which we obviously wouldn't want them to do, so we want them to be down toward never in the 1.98. So you can see that this is my dashboard of knowing that there's room for growth, but yet at the same time, there's not a great deal of alarm. You can see these are constructs of family out and maintenance and energy conservation. So this is just my way of seeing what's going on in the greater scheme of things, and I know that we're on target. We're moving along in the right direction. So now I have to take a look at, okay, I have a theoretical Homeflow model and I have extension data, and now I want to try and figure out what the applied Homeflow model will look like by using that data. So I go back and I look at what's inside that circle, those constructs, those 3 constructs of minor home conservation, how the family operates, and the maintenance. And those are the what can be altered, what you can shake things up, how people can change their behaviors. So that's what I'm going to look at. Those are the 3 targeted functions that I want to change, or I want to see how they can be changed. They're the independent variables in this particular instance known as factors, because I'm using factor analysis to crunch down a whole bunch of data into a little bit of manageable data so I can measure it or alter it in an effort to see the degree to which a home flows. And we have two ways that we measure it. We measure knowledge gain when they take the evaluation. We ask them knowledge gain, and we ask intent to change. And the way we do that is we first ask them all the questions. We ask them, to what degree do you understand? And we come back and we ask them all the questions again. These are both pre and post tests. So you ask them before they start, and then afterwards you ask them the same question, and then you ask them, I am confident I can. And that's a small, slight difference, but it's the difference between an intent and what we used for all of our calculations was I am confident I can. And I'll explain that in a little more detail here as we go. So for the minor home conservation, the independent variable factor 1 on that 1 to 5 scale, all these were for the intent to change. I'm confident I can save on electricity and water costs. And these are really big ones, 2 and 3, because they don't just go around on common dinner table discussion topics. I'm confident I can understand why balanced air pressure is important to the health of a home and its occupants. People don't go around talking about balanced air pressure. That is huge in our world, for especially where we target the preponderance of our education for Habitat for Humanity, for people to come in and get a 0% interest on a 30-year mortgage to get their first home, to be telling us they are confident they understand something about balanced air pressure. We feel very good about that. And confident I understand how indoor air quality affects the health of a home and its occupants. Those two indicators to us mean something, whether they are saying that, those are gaps, that's a pre-test and a post-test on the intent to change, that's the confident. With a Cronbach alpha of 0.9, so we can say with 90% reliability, obviously between the 105 samples, some didn't answer the question or whatever, for 89 respondents, we're 90% reliable that we're able to measure minor home conservation with as few as 3 specific, very accurate items. Those 3 items really get at the notion of minor home conservation. So we know that we're able to see that these folks are really growing and their ability to understand the healthy home concept. When we get to the family operations, we have a ton of items in here. We have 3 times as many items, so we have redundancy. It's easy to see why our Cronbach alpha is so reliable. But that's fine too. I mean, it all crunches it down with factor analysis to where we know we have a very strong, reliable measure. And it just so happened to be that we weren't looking ahead into the future for doing this. We didn't say, okay, we're going to do the extension study and we're going to end up with all these. We didn't have all these planned out items when we were doing. We didn't know which item was going to measure for which construct. We lacked the forethought, and as you can see, what happens when you lack forethought. We came to maintenance and we said, now which ones truly hit on maintenance? Well, we had a couple of nice maintenance items, but those maintenance items, they weren't enough and they weren't reliable. So we ran into trouble because we lacked the forethought for the scholarship of extension. So, this is where if you don't plan your work and work your plan, you can see what happens. We had too few specific accurate items. They're accurate, but there weren't enough of them to get a reliable Cronbach alpha score. 0.58 is not a high enough score to say that we accurately measured a maintenance factor. So we're in some trouble here. And then we want to look on the other side of the equation at the degree of home flow, and then these are just very broad. At the very end of the evaluation, we just ask very broad questions. So overall, I'm confident I can use home flow to maintain a healthy lifestyle. Overall, I'm confident I can use home flow to increase personal and/or family well-being. This is after they've done the entire program. They've answered all of the questions. And you can see now with two very broad questions or statements, but they're very broad but accurate measures, they turned out to be sufficiently reliable. When you get to 0.79 or 80%, you're okay. So I know that can get confusing. You say, well, why didn't the two prior and the two now are okay? Well, the two prior were very, very specific. These two are very, very broad. So the difference is that these are catch-alls. The two before that weren't quite catch-alls in the least. So we're asking ourselves, to what degree did the three constructs in the circle impact how a home flows? And just kind of hang on and let's just work our way through this and not get caught up in any of the math or anything. But you can write an equation for the theoretical degree to which a home flows, or the degree DHF to which a home flows. It can be written as some basic whatever, alpha or whatever. It's don't worry about the numbers that go on before them because they don't mean anything. It's just where it crosses the y-axis. But the minor home conservation plus another basic number that goes before family operations plus another basic number that goes before maintenance plus some error term, and that's getting at a linear regression. So when you actually put that in SPSS or whatever you use, it tells you the degree to which a home flows crosses slightly above the 0, 0 XY coordinate where it starts, and you have some number 0.43 times minor home conservation, 0.47 times family operations, and then 0.00 times maintenance plus an error term. And the reason you have this 0, maintenance, as I was explaining to you, we had trouble because maintenance was not did not reliably operationalize the construct maintenance because it was only a 0.59 Cronbach alpha. We can't use that. That's not reliable. So we have to take maintenance out of the equation. So the degree to which a home flows is 0.02 plus, this is just coming straight out of the computer, 0.43 times minor home conservation plus 0.47 times family operation plus some error term, and maintenance now has to go away because it wasn't reliably measured. So the computer tells you have some adjusted R squared, and it says that it's 62.8%, which represents the degree to which homes vary, or the variation in how they flow, or DHF. So 62.8% variation is composed of two factors: family operations, and this is really an eye-opener. It hurts me because I guess I still am hung up on ego, but it took me a year to go down the hallway to my colleague, Dr. Harris, and say, listen, home flow is not taking off the way I'd like it to, and I think it's because I need you to assist me. And I never thought I would ever work with a professor of marriage and relationships. And when I did, Habitat really came to me and they really explained, listen, what you have done with energy and upgrades, which is my field, we already have that. And what you've done with relationships and marriage, we could gain access to that. But what you have done by packaging those subjects together in a video-based format is absolutely revolutionary. We don't have access to that. And now what I have found is that my colleagues' material is really what's happening inside that house with those occupants. You know, I almost have 2/3 explanation of the variation in how a home flows. And the operations, though, you know, some of mine and some of his, is about 55% of that 62%, 63%, about 55.5% of it is falling back to family operations. And where I was originally thinking that the home flow really mattered was the minor home conservation and the maintenance, which I can't say about maintenance because I didn't measure it properly, but it's a very low 7.3. So you can see that from the data that's been collected, resoundingly, it is what goes on inside that house. And my point is, if you are putting out fires and constantly trying to control arguments, fights, disputes, quarrels, where is the home ever going to get a chance to be maintained and or upgraded? When does that home ever get its physical care when its emotional breakdown and maintenance is constantly at the forefront? And that's what this equation is telling us. Number one is telling us the preponderance of the degree to which a home flows is the daily issues that keep that home out of balance with family operations. Then if you can get that balance in check, then you can start worrying about how to take care of that home. But when you go to sell the home, if the home's not taken care of because you're constantly out of check with the balance of the occupants in the home, you're going to have to pay a lot of money to get that home brought up to where it needs to be to sell it or to move. And people are moving. That's just the way it works. So it appears that the model supports, the data supports the family operations, resulting in increases in stronger home occupant relationships, which doesn't necessarily translate as stronger families, which is what the model originally said, because that was not specifically how the items were measured. And that goes back to when Habitat became the number one force as a client. They said, we really feel that you are stressing in your videos the traditional family, and we need to let you know that we have 85% single mothers as our traditional client that is occupying our new homes with our 0% mortgage for 30 years. And if you look closely at the data, we believe it will behoove you to go back in and redo your videos, because nationwide, we feel not just Habitat, but as a whole, the US probably has a similar type of demographic. And that if you would take away the traditional family that you're gearing toward, and you would just speak to a less traditional family, you would have a more generalizable video. So we went back in and we stopped speaking about the traditional married family with the traditional children and this and that, and we started speaking about home occupants. And so the theoretical framework necessarily has to be modified and adapted to account for the fact that we're not talking about stronger families anymore. We're talking about stronger home occupant relationships. So if you recall, this is what the theoretical from the journal publication said. We come in with homes varying in how they're built, occupants varying in how they behave, and you have some options in how you're going to try and mix up the alterations and variables for the constructs. And then hopefully you will have some outcomes, either stronger financial and time savings and stronger families and communities, and or weaker, depending on how these are mixed up, how these are altered. So to what degree do these three constructs impact how a home flows? Well, the preliminary data, as I suggested earlier, family operations appear to be showing increases that have fit the applied model to show increases in stronger home occupant relationships, not stronger families. The maintenance factor at this point can't be spoken to because it was not reliably operationalized, because the too few specific accurate measures, though the literature certainly suggests it should impact the degree to which a home flows. The adapted applied model has to reflect the fact that it was not properly measured. Community flow was another article and model that I immediately came out with and replicated right after Homeflow. So I know that it is out there and has a chance to be measured, but I have not measured it and I've not turned it completely into an extension program, so I can't speak to stronger communities at this point. So I have to adjust the output and remove the stronger communities from the adapted applied model as well. Financial time and savings certainly are implied within the measures of the data, but again, I can't say emphatically that they all speak to in the data that they feel stronger about their ability with finances, but I don't have those direct measures to verify that output. So again, I have to adapt that applied model and remove that as an outcome. And the adapted applied model only measured the variation between the home occupant behaviors, and it did not measure the variation between the homes. So once again, that's going to have to be removed. So what you're looking at for the adapted applied home flow framework is one input versus two inputs. You don't have an input of variation between homes. I wasn't able to measure that with the Homeflow extension curriculum. Inside, you don't have three constructs that you can alter because I wasn't able to accurately and reliably measure maintenance for the degree to which a home flows, two constructs. And the output is stronger home occupant relationships instead of stronger. Let's just take a look on this. I put them together here. Stronger families, now it's stronger home occupant relationships. I had to remove and stronger communities because I didn't measure that. And financial savings and time savings I had to remove because that was not measured per se. So what you see between the original academic research theoretical framework and the adapted applied home flow framework is a much leaner, linear, to the point. And it's not saying one is more correct than the other. It's just saying that at this point in time, with the data points that have been captured, and there are going to be many more. We're in the process. That's the grants. We're still have many more points to come in, although according to statistics, you're not supposed to find big changes by bringing more data in. Once you have a certain level of statistics or data points, this should not change drastically, but I may have to look into changing the evaluation. It'd be nice to measure a little more closely what you were trying to measure from the theoretical model, rather than having to just say, okay, this is the best we can do here. So there's a long way to go, but at this point in time, what I can report is that this big theoretical model that people in the United States, homeowners, said they felt they would like to have, if they could have better control over these items in here, they thought it would result in more of these items out here. What I am able to tell in reality from actually doing some measures is that if there are better control of these items in here, there will be better output of this. And that's, I know that didn't last as long as we might like it to last, and perhaps there might be some questions, but that is the, when you take theory and then you apply it through extension, you have the scholarship of extension. So this is Homeflow and the scholarship of extension. So I would never know how this theoretical model shook out unless I had taken a theoretical model, made an extension curriculum, measured the extension curriculum, and now take this extension curriculum and publish it. So that's how you close the loop on the scholarship of extension. It's a lot, I know, probably. Go ahead,
Well,
Mike.
Randy, that's a fantastic presentation. For everybody else that's on the webinar, I actually had been to a webinar and I think a face-to-face on Homeflow, but this is the first time I've actually seen the analysis that you've done in the data collection. It's really fascinating. And again, as you said earlier, some of your preconceived notions of the results actually changed as you started to collect data. So it's really great to see. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. Let me unmute everybody real quick here. And you are welcome to ask Randy any questions you have. You're also welcome to use the chat window to ask any questions. So everybody who is unmuted, please feel free to ask questions. I don't see any questions. Randy, do you want to make any closing comments? I do want to remind everybody, especially for those of you that got on a little late, that we are recording this webinar and it will be available hopefully within the next week on our healthyhomespartnership.net website. You'll see under educator and webinars, you'll see the Homeflow series, including the earlier one that Randy did on what is Homeflow and a little bit more about the curriculum. So I'll ask one more time if you have any questions. And Randy, do you want to give any last minute comments?
Just that, as Michael was saying, it'll be posted. If you want to spend any time looking at it and reflecting on it, there's no way to separate academia, the research and the extension. We can't be separated anymore. There are no more silos to hide under. We are connected, and this is simply what it's all about. If we cannot explain, when we say we are evidence-based in extension, if we can't explain what that means, where our material comes from, and then we can't go out and publish our extension work and tie it back into true evidence, not, well, I mean, we have to show the full spectrum of what it's all about in order to get academics from the research realm to fully say, wow, okay, I get it. Extension has legs. Extension really is academic research-based work. I mean, that's what this stuff is all about. Now, I understand that some people are not as versed in statistics and regression and this and that. That's why we have on our staff right here people who will come right in and do that stuff for us. I mean, but this is how we get credibility. So take it for what it's worth, but this is what they're pushing down our throats around here so we can be preeminent. We have to show it this way, the scholarship of extension.
Absolutely, and that's true in Missouri too. That we have to be able to back up the for instance, in the Healthy Homes Partnership, the health outcomes that we have to be able to prove that it did make a difference. So it's good to see this analysis and follow up to the program. This will be the end of the webinar. I will stop recording, and again, we will be sending an email out within the week to give you all a link of where the recording is. So thank you very much, Dr. Randall Cantrell, and we look forward to seeing more webinars from you in the future.
Pleasure. Thanks, Michael.